So I didn't grow up with access to truly nourishing food. And I think that kind of sparked a curiosity in me to understand really what the power of food could be because I saw the impact that it made on the people that I loved. And and then I also, have really always been fascinated by the intelligence and the beauty of nature and how food comes in so many colors and textures and flavors. And that's what led me to study and get my degree in dietetics. And then I practiced for a while in the hospital, but it was pretty limiting. People were not just, they weren't really healing. And so that's what led me to functional medicine and really trying to figure out what the blocks were to healing and why the body had lost function. And then I turned my focus to gut health because it's really the center of everything. So our digestion, our mood, our hormones, our immunity, it's the center of all of that. As a dietitian and working in the hospital, there wasn't enough time to talk with people and really understand their story and really be able to help them, walk through the blocks. And traditional healthcare is actually really behind in the research. And so learning how everything is interconnected is really important, and that only came to be once I started practicing under the functional medicine paradigm, where I could spend the time with people to really connect, and that just made a world of difference. I was taught the food guide pyramid, and a lot of the information that dietitians are trained in and then impart to their patients or clients is based on big food and big agriculture, and it's not bio-individualized, so it's not unique enough for everyone, and everyone deserves that unique approach because one size doesn't fit all. What constitutes a healthy gut microbiome is really microbial diversity. So having an abundance of what I call the good gut buddies, so the beneficial microbes, they have many jobs and they're very protective. And so doing things and living in such a way and eating in such a way that supports that. We also want a gut that is full of the ability to have good function and really be able to digest the nourishing food and be able to assimilate it. There's many different steps involved in that, and there's many different organs involved in that. And so working to support those through nutrition, through supplementation, and also thinking about, we don't want our gut to be inflamed or permeable or leaky. And that causes a whole host of other challenges. And so there are many things that we can do that help bring down that inflammation and can help create more resiliency. In terms of things that might impact the gut in a negative way, that's where we want to think about, obviously, our nutrition and what we're consuming, avoiding things like processed foods and alcohol, a lot of sugar and starch and things like that. and concentrating more on diversity of plant foods. That's very helpful. Protein definitely has its place as well, but that's one of the quickest ways to actually grow and allow for a good environment for these bacteria to really thrive and flourish. And other things that we would think about would be the water that we're drinking and things that we're exposed to there. So whether that be, heavy metals or, medications, there's a lot of things, unfortunately, in our water supply. So we have to be mindful of that to make sure we're filtering that. We also think about stress and the role that plays, because when your nervous system is dysregulated, it really impacts digestion, because digestion is a top-down process. And so if you're stressed, or you are feeling guilty, or there's fear around what you're consuming or what you're doing, that really slows down the body's ability to perform and to recognize that food is coming into the system, and that it needs to make the digestive secretions that it needs to be able to break the food down. So everything very much slows down. And I do very much believe that emotional and spiritual and the mindset around how someone's feeling plays a huge role in what's going on in the gut microbiome. So all those things are important to consider. Other things to think about are sleep, right? We have to have the downtime to recover and to be able to restore the body. And you can't separate gut health from things that really stress the body out, or don't allow for us to tap into our own rhythm and the rhythm of nature. And so, yes, I think that nature is huge. As I was saying, before, all of the food and the plants and the herbs and the animals and the water and the sunlight, they all play a role in how we feel and how we can show up and how our body functions. Our body always wants to work for us. And when we are disconnected from those elements of nature and the way we were created and designed to live, which many of us are in the busy, fast-paced world, and under these fluorescent lights and working all hours of the night and all these things, we can't heal. We can't expect to thrive and feel good. Those are all things that I talk to my clients about and really emphasize. You can eat a perfect diet, but if you're missing these other elements, it doesn't get you very far. I think we are living in a society, especially over the last several years, where we have this major push and influence to sanitize and to be clean. And I think the idea of what clean really is maybe a little misconstrued. And the over sanitation and all of the overuse of antibiotics and all these things are killing off our good gut flora, our good gut buddies. That is a tragedy because they have so many roles in the body. And we want to understand that we live in symbiosis with all of these microbes. They've always been here. All these bacteria and viruses and, all these other microbes, we've developed a fear of these things. And a lot of that, was pushed on us in many ways and continues to be through the idea that you need to use things like bleach and antibacterial soaps and things of that nature. And that's not the idea. The idea is not to just kill the microbes. It's to understand how we all, developed over centuries together. And again, there can be a relationship there. And I think people just don't understand enough about how protective our beneficial flora are. And it's about creating diversity there. And how we do that is not through killing things off. Sometimes there's a place for that. Sometimes that needs to happen to a certain extent. But what we really want to focus on is how can we build up our good guys, because with that we have resilience, we have more health freedom, actually. The more that we have of that balance of good bacteria. And I'll say that I think that's more often the challenge when I'm doing stool testing and things. It's not always that people have this overgrowth of disruptive microbes. It's that they don't have enough support. They don't have enough of the good guys. But we can accomplish that through a variety of things like expanding the diet and actually going out in nature and coming in contact with these microbes. That's how we build that relationship, and that's how we build that resiliency. When we think about children, we know that there's actually studies out there that show that children are having more diseases and more symptoms and more illness the more that they are sanitized or the more that they are having these interventions of that killing nature of, again, antibiotics, I think are over prescribed. And so when we don't have a healthy gut microbiome, our immune system suffers greatly. And I think it also teaches children to be afraid, which then does a number on their nervous system, which then does a number on their gut microbiome. And it's all interconnected. I think there's value in these microbes and getting outside and getting in the dirt and just not being so sanitized. That's not the focus. And the focus is about diversity and having more experiences with different elements of nature and of the world. That makes me think about the soil on our planet and the soil that's growing our crops, and how depleted it is. And it's just wild to think how little nutrition is in these crops these days. Even the organic crops. I mean, there's more there than there is in conventional crops, but But it's really sad that it's developed in that way over the years. And a big part of that is because of the influence of genetically modified crops and all of the herbicides and pesticides and things that are used to grow those crops. And it really is doing us a major disservice. And I don't think people realize that these things like glyphosate, what a burden it is to the system, and how they act as natural antibiotics. And they're actually designed as a chelator to chelate different minerals. And so we become further and further deficient when we consume these foods. And it's not, none of it was in our best interest and for health as they touted that it would be. We have plenty of food here to feed the world. We don't need to have these genetically modified crops to be able to do that. We need to take a different direction on what we're actually doing with the food supply. A lot of people are curious about ways that they can improve their gut health, and one of those ways is to consume fermented foods. Because fermented foods are amazing for most people. Now, if you have a histamine issue or something like that, maybe they're not the best choice, for everyone. But for most people, they can benefit from consuming fermented foods because they have different kinds of bacteria strains in them. And not only that, they have the fiber in the food itself. So if you got like a sauerkraut, for example, it would have the cabbage, which would have the fiber, which is food for the probiotics, for the bacteria. So it's like a 2-in-1. And so that's really great. And it's really easy just to add a little bit, to your plate. And I think it's better when you can have a food first approach. And it's also okay to take probiotics. I think there's a place for those too. I think many people can benefit there. And then we can actually get really specific about what your needs are and play to that with the different strains that we can supplement with. But with the fermented food, you get the food for the bacteria too, so that they have more of a chance to be able to colonize. Because I think that people automatically assume that if they take a probiotic that it's gonna take hold, and that's not always the case. It has to have the right environment to be able to colonize and to thrive. And so you have the fiber in the fermented foods to help there. And then other things that help feed probiotics are what we call prebiotics. And prebiotics are the food for the probiotics. And so some natural prebiotics would be things like garlic and asparagus and the whole onion family, onions and leeks. We think about artichokes. Those are some of the more, potent prebiotics, but there's also supplemental prebiotics that you can take as well to make it easy in that way too. Some of the more well-researched ones are things that have cranberry and golden kiwi is really great. So, you can concentrate on those things, and then just know too that the more diversity of plant foods you have, the more different kinds of fiber you're going to consume, the more that you can feed these different strains of bacteria. And so that's a positive thing. Thinking about how we can improve our digestion, one of the things that comes to mind that seems very simplistic, but is very, very powerful is chewing our food thoroughly. And we want to think about chewing our food to a pureed consistency before we swallow it. I don't really subscribe to the idea that we need to chew, 20 or 30 times before we swallow, because I think that can create some other concerns when people are counting like that. But just to think about chewing your food to a pureed consistency before you swallow. Don't have a bite of food here ready to eat before you have swallowed this one that you have in your mouth. It comes back to letting the body and the organs that make these digestive secretions to break your food down. It comes back to letting them know that food is coming into the system. That's why we have teeth, right? Because we are meant to masticate this food to make it easier for the other downstream organs to be able to break it down and assimilate it and use it. Mindfulness is a practice I teach often at mealtimes, and many people, including myself, sometimes are eating in a hurry. And we're eating while we're driving, or we're eating while we're working, or we might be watching a dramatic show, or we might be, sitting down with the family or loved ones and talking about our day and talking about, things that went wrong. That's not the time that you want to do those things, because what that does is that triggers the nervous system to put you more in that state of sympathetic overdrive, that fight, flight, freeze response, because you're stressed. And what we want to activate is the parasympathetic arm of the nervous system, which is the rest and digest arm. And so the way we do that is by remembering, again, digestion is a top-down process. It actually starts with what you're thinking about and the state of mind that you are in. And so when you sit down for a meal, you really want to be intentional. You really want to use it as an experience. Think about it as an experience, and think about how you can activate all of your senses. So looking at the colors of your food, smelling your food, really tasting it in your mouth. And this is where gratitude and prayer can really be profound, because it signals to the body, okay, food is coming and I'm happy about it, and I'm not afraid of what I'm eating. And I am really grateful that I can eat this food. And what is it going to do to my body? It's going to nourish me. And all of that tells the body to come online and start doing what it needs to do. When people are going too quickly, the organs don't even have a chance to really recognize that. And so they don't make what is needed. And then we end up with things like bloating or constipation or other GI symptoms. And we don't get the most out of our food. We don't get the nutrition that we need. And we also don't recognize that we're full. And so then that can lead to overeating, that can lead to cravings and continuous snacking and things like that. When really we could get our needs met if we put a little more intention into our meal and didn't think about it as a afterthought or something we just had to do just to keep going. Our ancestors, they hunted for their food. They picked food in the garden. They spent time preparing it, and they sat down together and had a nice meal. And I know that's not, the reality for us, but there are some ways that we can tap into that way of being and thinking with our food, and we'll just get a lot more out of it. So hydration is another area of opportunity for our overall health, for our energy, and definitely to keep things moving along in the gut. When we think about hydration, it's really important to, I think, to start the day really hydrating, because that's the time that you're most dehydrated, is when you wake up in the morning, because you've been, fasting and not drinking for many hours prior to that. So I like to talk to people about setting a goal of committing to a certain amount of good filtered water when they first wake up, because the day gets busy and you get away from it. And so sometimes that's why people don't get their hydration needs met for good filtered clean water. And so if they can commit to having that first thing in the morning, then at least they've knocked that out. And there's other strategies that we use, throughout the day to make sure the people stay hydrated. One of the times that we actually don't want to be hydrating really is at mealtime. Now, having a couple of sips of something is okay. But we don't want to be chugging lots of liquids while we're eating, because it really dilutes our stomach acid, and it makes it harder for us to break our food down. And then that leads to other symptoms. So if you are going to drink while you eat, I recommend room temperature or warm water, and just to have a couple sips. But we really want to concentrate it outside of meal times. We don't just have to drink water. We also want to think about electrolytes. Electrolytes can be very helpful for many people to actually hydrate the cells. And then we think about things like different kinds of teas. I'm a huge fan because there's so many varieties that all have different benefits. And like, for example, drinking green tea is very helpful for the gut microbiome. It actually has polyphenols and catechins that feed these bacteria. It helps with hormone metabolism. So it's a really a good choice. And there's other teas that have many other benefits too, like pu'er teas, like fermented pu'er teas are, again, another, fermented food, that can help feed the good flora. Things like ginger tea can be very helpful for bloating, and peppermint tea can be very helpful for nausea. There's many options there. Some juice every now and then can also have its benefits, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, like pomegranate juice, right? Or cranberry juice is a way to get these polyphenols in the system. There's no fiber there, so we have to be careful about blood sugar. We don't just want to have tons and tons of juice, but it can be a good option. And what we really don't want to have is things like soda, because there's really no benefit there. Whether it's a lot of actual, cane sugar, or whether it's artificial sweeteners. These artificial sweeteners and things that are in those are not good for our gut flora, for our gut bacteria. These contribute to the growth of the disruptive microbes, and they can also cause symptoms like bloating and gas and other, pain and irritability. So it's not worth it. And if you want something carbonated, there's many, sparkling waters available too, which I think is great from time to time. We want the body to be more of an alkaline environment. The one area that we want to actually be more acidic, well, two areas. I would say the vaginal canal, but also the stomach. We were designed to create hydrochloric acid, and pepsin and some other things. There's a couple reasons for that. One is because we need it to break down our proteins, and we also want the stomach acid because then it prevents bacteria from coming into the GI tract and kind of taking over, or even into the stomach itself. And then that results in things like having H. pylori, which can lead to ulcers and a lot of pain and things like that. So, I believe we were created perfectly. And this idea that we need to reduce the stomach acid is really a tragedy. And this is something that I see very often in my practice as people come to me with acid reflux, or GERD or Barrett's esophagus or some variation of acid reflux. And usually they have been told by their doctors to go on to antacid medications, whether it be over the counter or things like proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers. There's various different kinds of medication, but the goal is to suppress that stomach acid because that stomach acid is coming back up into their esophagus and causing pain and problems. But when we do that, then we often find that people end up having overgrowth of bacteria. They have a downstream effect, and then their liver and their gallbladder and things have to work harder. Their pancreas can get off track, right? Because everything is kind of overcompensating for that. It's not a good idea. What we want to think about is, why is there imbalance there to begin with? And some of that is because those sphincters on either side in the stomach get stuck open. And part of that is due to stress, and that drains and creates a deficiency in magnesium. And so then that gets stuck open, and then what's supposed to go down comes back up. And so acid and food and things come back up and cause a challenge. And so what we can think about is, are we consuming something, or are we living in such a way that is creating that stress? So a lot of times what I find is that people actually have food sensitivities or food allergies or intolerances, and that's creating the disruption. They're also not eating very mindfully, and they're very stressed out, and they might be, kind of living on coffee and things throughout the day. So all of those things contribute. And when we can get to the root causes of where the acid reflux is coming from, that really helps. And what we really often have to do is actually restore that hydrochloric acid and put that back into the system for it to function properly. And so I work with people often on how to wean down off of those medications using supplements and lifestyle. Some things that you might not think about, but are pretty common to know that you have lower stomach acid would be burping. Burping is a big one. And then feeling bloated, feeling like food is just kind of sitting in your gut. Those are two of the main things that I consider. And ways that you can restore stomach acid is to, again, identify those different root causes and work to correct those. But you can also take hydrochloric acid supplementally, And you can do things like apple cider vinegar and lemon. These are going to help you naturally produce hydrochloric acid on your own. Magnesium does too, to a certain extent. So there are several things to think about during the day that are small things that really add up and can really pay dividends in balancing the gut microbiome and improving the health of the gut. And one of the first things I think about is waking up and brushing your teeth, so that you don't swallow all of the bacteria and the things that have been kind of growing overnight. So that's a good idea. Of course, we want to use a good quality fluoride-free toothpaste, but that's something that's important. Hydrating first thing in the morning when you wake up is great, and I often recommend electrolytes in that because that also helps get the bowels going as well. Walking or movement anytime throughout the day is beneficial, but particularly after eating. So it can be just a short 5-minute walk. It can even be, a couple of air squats. Anything you can do to move your body after you eat really promotes better digestion and also helps with blood sugar regulation too. And I think about taking some time during the day. Before meals is great to take some deep breaths, but having some time for yourself just to decompress and recalibrate and give yourself and your body some time to just kind of chill for a minute. And a lot of that, we just don't take the time. And so it all adds up. Even just a few minutes of prayer or breath work can be really, really helpful. If you can eat your food outside, that's also super powerful. The sun does so much for our bodies, but also for the food, for the live, whole, real food. I think that's really important. I think about making sure that you get in bed at a decent time. There's a lot of action that's happening overnight, and so you're going to miss out on some of that restoration recovery if you stay up too late. And I also recommend that they stop eating a couple of hours before they go to bed, because we don't want our body to have to manage the digestion and the blood sugar and things when we really want it to be, breaking down the plaque in our brain, for example. And so and also if people are dealing with acid reflux, that's a huge thing that can be very helpful to calm that down. I think that true gut healing is so much more than just what we put in our mouth and what we put around us. I think it has a lot to do with our mindset and with what's going on in our brain and in our nervous system. I think that the gut-brain axis is an area where we are learning so much more, and that has been really undervalued and overlooked in the traditional mental health approach. And I think about people that do have anxiety or mood swings or foggy brain, cognition issues. All of those things can actually improve when the gut microbiome improves. There's a lot of people that don't actually even have symptoms, traditional like gut health symptoms or GI symptoms. It's all stuff that is going on in their brain. And I always want to unpack what's going on in the gut, even though they don't have those traditional symptoms, because when you improve the gut, you improve the brain, and vice versa. They're so interconnected that you can't separate the two, because of so much of our who we are and our foundation is resides in the health of our gut. I think that we just can't overlook it. We always want to optimize it. And I think cortisol is another element that is huge. People being very busy and not necessarily, taking enough time for themselves to really nurture and nourish themselves, or even just to slow down and let the body recalibrate. But what's also coming to mind is people that come to see me often have a lot of food fear. They have a lot of fear about what they are eating, and it makes sense because they've had a lot of pain. They've had a lot of symptoms as a result. And so the body, sees stress in all the same, whether it's external stressors like ones we think about, like traffic or work or relationships or state of the world, or internal stressors, like lack of digestive function or food sensitivities or, bacterial imbalances. The body is registering that all the same. And I think it's important to make those connections. And I really try to help support people in understanding that they have a lot of freedom and power in their choices. And when we can get to the root of what's going on and really help support the body as a whole, which starts very much in the gut, and how well we can utilize these nutrients, then there's really nothing to be afraid of, and to recognize that they have the power to heal, that's their divine inheritance, is to feel good and to live in a body that they really love. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is on the rise, and it is impacting younger and younger generations. And a lot of people think about the liver as, being influenced negatively by alcohol, but as the diagnosis says, this is a situation where it's not alcohol that is the culprit. Oftentimes it's fructose is a big player in this. So think about high fructose corn syrup that's in so many processed foods and sodas and things like that, and candies and all of that. The buildup of that is really problematic. And we also can get fatty, deposits on our liver, and it can get stagnant when it's bombarded by toxins, because the liver has to detox all the things that we come in contact with. When the liver is not functioning optimally, then that can create a whole cascade of symptoms. What we want to think about is, how can we minimize our exposure to different toxins in the environment. And I help people with that because unfortunately they're pretty ubiquitous. So we think about how we can minimize our exposure, but then also how we can support the liver and nourish the liver. And so the liver really loves bitter foods. So I might use a supplemental bitters tincture. But I'm always going to also talk to people about how they can incorporate more bitter foods into their diet. So think about things like arugula and, dark leafy greens like kale, like collard greens and mustard greens and turnip greens and then things like cruciferous vegetables like bok choy and cauliflower and broccoli. These sulfur-rich vegetables can really help with phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification. We want to give this organ more of what it needs so it can do its job because it has a really major job to do. The gallbladder is a organ that is also very instrumental, and unfortunately I find that more and more people are having their gallbladder removed, which is just should not be the first line therapy. I know there's situations where that is necessary, but a lot of times it's not. And there are ways to help support the gallbladder from not developing gallstones or gallbladder sludge, which is usually the impetus to taking it and removing it. And we can live a healthful life without it, but we were also created with it because it matters. And when we don't have our gallbladder, it puts a big strain on the liver and all the other organs. The liver makes the bile, and we need to have good bile flow. Liver gives that to the gallbladder, and that's what helps us primarily emulsify our fats. And I find that people, they don't have adequate amounts of these different fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A and D and E and K, because they don't do a good job with emulsifying their fats, and or their bile flow is stagnant. Another thing that leads to these gallstones is lipid metabolism and how well they do with cholesterol and how many fatty foods they consume. All of those things can contribute. And so working to minimize, fried foods and fatty foods, and focusing more on getting your fats from healthy fats like olive oil and, avocado and nuts and seeds, that can be a real game changer. If you do have gallstones or gallbladder sludge, there's ways to support that before you make the move to remove that vital organ. I walk people through gallbladder flushes and ways to help get those stones to break up. Olive oil and lemon are very profound. I also use things like turmeric and bitter, like the bitters tincture that I was talking about with the liver. But yeah, bitter herbs in general really help that bile flow and help it to not be stagnant and sludgy. The bulk of my population of people that I see are those that haven't been able to get the care that they need or deserve through traditional means. And so I see a lot of people that have inflammatory bowel disease, so things like Crohn's and different forms of colitis, and also other other disorders like autoimmune disorders like celiac disease. And I just think it's really important to not underestimate our diet and our nutrition. It's really wild to me how they've seen, many different specialists and many different gastroenterologists, and these gastroenterologists are not all of them, of course, but they're not considering the diet, and it plays such a huge role in what's going on in the gut microbiome. So a lot of times we can really turn those conditions around and really turn down that inflammation that's going on there through an anti-inflammatory nutritional protocol, and then creating an environment where the good gut buddies can really thrive, and where we've restored digestive function. So there's a couple of different, presentations that people come to me with, but ultimately, the body has a lot of wisdom, and the symptoms are messengers to tell us that we need to think about how we can get in alignment. And that has a lot to do with what we put in our mouth, what we put around us, and what we believe to be true.